The question for you guys is when you should start. You want to create an environment where you dig your well before you're thirsty. I told you guys in 2011 I started a fund with my partners. My only regret was that I didn't start a 9-figure fund. Honestly, I wasn't thinking big enough. I was 25. I'm like, we raised whatever, tens of millions of dollars. Like, this is amazing. And, tens of millions today would be worth a lot more than it was then, in terms of economic value. But still, why wasn't I thinking bigger? And I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. But today, I know, and we want to make different decisions. So the question for you guys is when you should start. Well, obviously the best time would have been in 2011 because that would have been a fantastic time. And the next best time is actually now, literally right now. Because you can learn the business, you can pair yourself up with the right people. Do you bring capital? Do you bring contacts? Do you bring asset management? What do you bring to the equation? And bring that to a team or form a team. And the next couple of years will be probably the most impactful in your lives. Because I can tell you right now, I don't have a slide for this, but there is, so one of my mentors, Ken McElroy, he owns MC Companies out of Arizona. He's over $2 billion in assets now. He wrote a lot of the books for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, him and they're best friends. He's his Rich Dad advisor for real estate. So he was my first mentor. When I raised the first tens of millions of dollars before I broke out on my own, I raised money for him. And when I interviewed him on his podcast a few months ago, one of the things he brought up to me that I brought it front row center in my mind was that when the 07-08 crash happened, the other thing that happened is a lot of builders got wiped out. A lot of the builders and the ones that didn't get wiped out were shit scared to build because of what was going on in the economy. So not just on the residential side, but on the multifamily side. And so from about 2010, essentially from 2007-08, when the crash happened, till about 2012, they didn't build multifamily. Like, they literally weren't building multifamily. So that 5-year, 7-year gap in new builds, we've never recovered that. And that amount a few years ago was 5 million homes that are required to house people. That number is closer to 7 million now. So that gap has only grown. So why do I share that with you guys? Well, in the context of what I do with the Burke Apartments, it's clean, safe, affordable housing. I paid $11 million for this thing. As you guys drive this property today, especially for those of you who used to live in California or other parts of the world, you'd be like, 11 million? This would be like $1 billion back home. And the reason for it is because the replacement cost is so important today in real estate. It's never mattered. Replacement cost, as the name implies, what does it cost to replace said building? I never cared. My partner, he's not here today, Raymond, he's done over $3.5 billion in transactions. He's been in the business for almost 40 years. Literally, he confirmed this. He goes, 5 years ago, nobody in commercial real estate really cared about replacement costs as a number. We all used it for insurance. That was literally the only time any of us would look at the replacement cost of anything is when we have to go negotiate. And then we would fight for it to go down, obviously, because we want to get the insurance down, right? So today, replacement cost is one of the biggest unfair advantages you guys have with value add multifamily. Because as you'll see the property today, drive through it and ask yourself, could I replace this today for $11 million? Never. That wrought iron fence that goes through the front of the property, that'd be $100,000. Just that wrought iron fence all the way up the property. Paved parking lot with concrete. They build highways out of this stuff. Don't do the stuff, like just when you walk the property, stone, concrete, glass, like all this stuff, like the replacement cost, because of inflation and COVID and what happened with money printing and all that stuff, replacement cost is a big deal today. So my thesis is this. You have a lot of these older properties, 80s. By the way, I typically don't recommend you go below 80s, and we'll talk about, Kim, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but I don't recommend you go pre-80s, and I'll talk about that why after. But post-80s, ideally 80s to 2000s, properties that people just got a head on their skis on. They just got over-leveraged, overzealous, they paid too much for it. They either paid too much, they got the wrong debt, or they didn't spend their money properly, or they mismanaged it. And I'm betting that there's hundreds of these properties, just in Houston alone. I hear murmurs all the time. Hey, would you look at this? I have brokers literally saying like, hey, so like theoretically, if I had this deal and they're describing something to me, I don't know exactly which property you're talking about, right? But my point is that there's a lot more of this stuff coming. And when you combine the fact that you're gonna have the replacement cost, who in this room would think that plumbing is gonna be cheaper in 5 years? Or concrete is gonna be cheaper, or wood's gonna be cheaper? None of us, right? We all inherently know that things are gonna be more expensive. We all feel that way. So if we all feel that way, that's probably how most people feel. Labor's more expensive too. I mean, California just raised minimum wage to $25. They need a lot more automated McDonald's stands is what they're gonna get. They started, you guys seen this? They started experimenting with, you pull up to a McDonald's, it looks like it's a McDonald's, but it's like a mechanical factory. And AI talks to you. There's an AI that talks to you at the reception. At the order booth, right? There's no people there, and like a tray just comes out. Because who can afford to pay somebody $25 an hour and not charge? I went to Burger King on the drive home. I paid $12 for a Whopper. I mean, you remember Whoppers used to be 99 cents. Used to have the Whopper Wednesdays. I grew up on that shit. Like probably shows, but my point is that it's inconceivable. You go to Subway, it's a sub is $18. Like it's insane. So I don't think any of us believe things are going to get cheaper. And my whole point is, if things aren't going to get cheaper and they're going to keep getting more expensive, in the context of real estate, bricks and sticks and labor, put up the stuff now. There's a big thing in the news where, oh my God, they're overbuilding the higher end properties here in Texas and there's going to be a glut of rentals. Yeah. You think the builders are stupid? No, they know exactly what they're doing. They know that it's okay to overbuild because they know the population's coming here anyway, and they'd rather buy lumber at today's prices than what it's going to be in 24 months. They're not stupid. They'll deal with the vacancy for 6 or 12 months. Sure, why not? The thing is, it's there. I believe, especially because in our space, the stuff that we're buying, there's a lot of owners that overpaid, they were too aggressive, and they're gonna have to sell, and we're gonna wanna work with the banks to help them out. That's gonna be where we're gonna be at in the next little bit. Now, an interesting thing about a recession, it feels like forever, but recessions only last for about a year and a half on average. So if you look at all the last recessions, I forget which report I cited from this, but this looked at the last 100 years of all the different recessions that happened. And recessions are defined by 2 negative quarters back to back. So if you combine all the recessions that happened throughout the last 100 years, actually this excludes COVID. This report excluded COVID because COVID was like a 2-month recession. It was the weirdest thing in the world. But with the exception of COVID, the average recession lasts, like I said, 17 months. So the point is, we may not be in a recession right now, but we're pretty close. And when we hit it, that's not the time to start getting set up, because by then you need to be ready to have those conversations. That call I had with the broker yesterday, when I was in the car and we were talking, like you could clearly tell that the guy hadn't sold something in a while. Blake, is that true? You could hear it in his voice, or you were in the car with us, right? You could hear it, right? Like he hadn't sold anything. But by the time he got off the phone with me, was I his best friend or what? Yeah, he was very excited to stay on the phone. And the point is I'm trying to impart as much of that on you guys as possible, but you want to create an environment where you dig your well before you're thirsty, where you have people buy in, you have your investors buy in, you have your team buy in, you have people buy into what you're doing before you've done it. Like even today, the fact that you guys are going to be boots on the ground, you guys should mentally be thinking about how you can leverage that and literally pull out your phone and shoot some content. Literally, no one's going to look at you funny. Actually, I might look at you funny if you don't. Like literally, take the phone, go wander off, talk for a few minutes, be like, hey, I'm on this property. The reason why I came down here is X, Y, Z. I'm not saying you have to go live on Instagram or any of this stuff, but just start filming this stuff. Start capturing it, because you want to capture people's attention that you're active, that you're doing stuff. Wherever you're investing, regardless of if you're doing it here, the fact that you're aware and in tune with what's going on, people are following you, and just because they're not liking all your stuff doesn't mean they're not watching it. Multifamily Canada versus US. When we think multifamily in Canada, we think this. When we think multifamily here, we think this. That's more to size. Now, so look, I'm not saying Canada's not a good place to do multifamily. The problem is it's small and it's hard to scale. And because our geography is so spread out, it is difficult to really build any critical mass anywhere. It's just tough. I mean, we have 40 some odd million people in a country the land size 1.5 times the United States. Texas has 30 million people in the size of Ontario, right? So just geographically speaking, like you just have so much more scale, so much more reduced risk because of that. Also, I made the joke earlier, what rhymes with Canada? Taxes. Unfortunately, that's true. We get taxed up the wazoo in Canada. Capital gains just went up to 2/3. You're welcome. Look, I'm a Canadian, I get it. And it's harder and harder. Now, the thing is, if you have a very long-term outlook and you're okay with investing in small markets and like secondary and tertiary markets, You can make money. You will make money. Real estate is forgiving. The challenge is, do you want to own 18 units 3 hours away from home and then another 17 units 6 hours that way? And because of those things cost more money. Your property management costs more money. Snow removal. You got all it really eats away at what we can do. And then there's really nothing we can do about that. Australia is just another version of Canada. I don't know who's big brother or little brother, but we're twins. Australia is the slightly more attractive younger brother to Canada. Let's say that. Whereas multifamily US, it's much more collaborative. And the biggest cultural difference between Americans and Canadians is Americans do collaborate, whereas Canadians do compete. And I don't know what that is in our culture, but it is much more of a competitive nature because I think things are smaller. So we tend to compete with each other. Whereas in the US, guys like Lionel might get together with Kim, with TJ and go, okay, cool. Hey, we want to do this thing. Can we do it together? And then you collaborate. So I encourage you guys, especially my Canadians in the room, is to start to think of more of a collaborative nature, because if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, how do I do another 12-plex? You're already mentally losing the game because you're immediately now thinking, you're trying to fit things into your existing capacity. And that's never worked out well for me.